Hello and welcome to the Smart Money Canvas. Today we're going to be looking at the subject of protection, a very important subject, however, not so public. But it's important that we talk about it and it's important that we learn about it. Now, when we're referring to protection or financial protection or insurance, as some people call it, we're not really referring to you, the target, as the one receiving the protection. We're referring to the people that depend on you for financial support as the ones being protected. Now, there are different kinds of protection or financial protection. We've got critical illness cover, we've got health insurance, we've got income protection, but we're not talking about any of those today. We're only just zooming in to life cover, life insurance. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I think that is by far the most important product or the most important element of financial protection, because with life insurance or with life cover, you're no longer on the same. We're now just going to be dealing with the people that you've left behind and what's going to become of the support that they've been receiving from you before you left. Okay. I know it's not a very popular subject to be talking about death, but it comes to all of us. Now, when people die, there are two things that they leave behind. Okay. When you die, when I die, the two things we're all going to leave behind. The first one is memories. Okay. What will people remember us for? What kind of feelings will come to their minds or their hearts when they remember us? That's the first thing that we leave behind. The second thing we leave behind is money. Okay. Whether in a positive form or the negative form, whether it's going to be liability or assets, we leave money behind. So these are the two M's, memories and money, that we leave behind. Today, I'm not going to be talking to you about the memories, right? I'm only going to be talking to you about the money that you're going to be leaving behind. Okay. So let's jump onto the canvas as we begin exploring this subject today. Now, when it comes to financial protection, the financial obligations that you have towards your dependents. So the obligations is what I want us to explore first. So what are the obligations that a typical adult will have towards the people that are relying on them for financial support? There are, I think, about 4 of these obligations that I want us to look at today. The first one is the upkeep. Say, currently, as an adult, looking after your kids, you take care of their accommodation, right roof over their head, you put clothes on the back, food on the table, right? So their monthly upkeep, that's the first one. Monthly, weekly, however, but just their upkeep, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is their education. If you've got dependents, not necessarily your spouse, but if you've got children that are still growing, at some point they will go off to school, and then you want to be able to take care of the cost of their education. So this is education. So that's the second obligation you've got there. The third obligation, not very nice or doesn't quite sound nice, is funeral cost. Okay. Because when you pass on, right, your dependents will need to cover that cost. So we're going to put that there as part of the obligation that you've got, funeral costs. And the fourth obligation that you have is your estates. What are you going to leave behind for them? Are you going to leave behind some form of inheritance? Like, the property that you're living are you going to leave that behind? Or you got some asset portfolio that you're going to leave behind? That is what we refer to as estate. Or you could also call that inheritance. Okay. So these are the 4 things that I want you to pay attention to. As you're listening to me right now, you could grab a pen and paper and then just note it down. Your monthly costs, as in what you currently contribute towards the family. If as a husband or as a wife, you contribute £2,000. If you're no longer there, that's a void. Okay, something we need to fill that void. Now, the education, um, depending on which part of the world you currently reside in, most countries, children pay tuition fees to go to uni, right? Even if they have free education till the secondary school level, by the time they get to uni, they pay tuition fees and also the cost of living as well. You need to think about that. And then, like I said, when you pass on the funeral costs, they can't avoid that. They'll have to pay. And then the last is the estate, the inheritance that you're leaving behind. Okay. Now, let's go a step further by doing some calculations. Let's put some numbers against. Okay, so let's do some calculations. The first one is the monthly cost. Now, you need to work that out yourself. How much do you currently contribute towards the household? Okay, how much is coming from you as a contribution? So for that, I'm just going to use an arbitrary figure. You can, sort that figure for yours, right? So I'm just going to put £3,000 here. £3,000. So let's say that's what you contribute. That's £3,000 per month. Okay, it's important we mention that £3,000 per month. Then number two, the tuition fees and also the upkeep as well for your children when they go to uni. I'm going to use a UK number as indicative figure for these video. In the part of the world that you reside, you can find it out. You can Google it, or you can ask those who've gone through it. You can find out how much it will cost your kids to go through uni. I'm using the UK number. In the UK, our kids here, they go through uni spending 3 years, right? So they're going to pay tuition fees for 3 years. At the minute, it costs about 9,000 plus, approximately about 10,000 a year for tuition fees in England. I believe in Scotland is free, but in England, you pay about £10,000. So that means over the period of 3 years, that's going to be about £30,000. That's going to be the cost there. But of course, when your kids go to school, there are additional costs. There's a living expenses, right? And some other, paying for books and all that. Those are additional costs. So I'll say let's work that out to be about £15,000, right? In a year, £15,000 in a year. So you got £10,000 plus £15,000. That comes to about £25,000 a year. £25,000 per year. Like I said, in the UK, you multiply that by 3, and that gives you £75,000. Yeah, that's 75K. Now, you need to multiply these by the number of children you've got. So if you've got one child, that's it, 75K, all sorted. If you go 2, that's 150,000. If you go 3, that is £225,000 you need to make arrangement for. So let's work with a figure for 2. Yeah, okay? Times 2. So that comes to about £150,000. Okay, 150,000. Now let's go to number 3. Number 3, we're looking at funeral cost. Now, in the UK, the funeral cost is not that expensive. I did a research before this video, and it's under £10,000, the average cost of funeral. So it's somewhere between 3,000 and £10,000. But let's just put £5,000. So with £5,000, you should be able to have a decent, burial or a decent funeral. So let's put £5,000. That's for them. And some people also actually take out funeral policy or funeral insurance. You can consider taking that out as well. And if you do, you're paying your premium separately. You can take this figure of £5,000 out of your calculation for your life cover. Okay, well, for easy calculation, they just leave £5,000 in. And then the last but not the least is we're talking about your estate. So if you're currently paying a mortgage on the house that you're living in, a nice thing to do will be to make arrangement for that balance to be paid off if anything happens to you. You don't want your family to carry that burden, right, of paying the mortgage. That leaves them, like I said, two things you leave behind: memories and money. You don't want them to be negative money, right? And then the lender will now repossess their house. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that whatever the balance on your mortgage is, you make sure it's part of your calculation. Okay. So let's just assume that that figure comes to about £150,000 as well. So £150,000 mortgage balance. Now, these are just indicative figures, right? Your number will be different from what you've got on the screen right now, on the canvas right now. So you need to work out what your own numbers are, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a summary of how much your sum assured for your policy should be, okay? So we've got 150,000 for number 4. We've got 5,000 for number 3. We've got 150,000 for number 2. But we need to work out what number 1 would be, because with number 1, this is you as the individual providing that £3,000 on a monthly basis. Now, when you go out of the picture, you need to reintroduce, or you need to introduce a replacement. And that replacement, which I and which we within Prism Check strongly encourages, is a portfolio. So you swap yourself out, you replace, say, with a portfolio. So I'm just going to put a portfolio, or an investment portfolio, or asset portfolio. So let's call that asset portfolio, actually. So that asset portfolio, the role of the asset portfolio will be to generate £3,000 per month. £3,000 per month. And then what we're going to do is let's say that portfolio needs to have a capital. So that capital needs to generate £3,000 every month. So if you have a capital, or rather, if the capital needs to generate, or that portfolio needs to generate £3,000 a month, that means £36,000 a year. So let me just put that here, £36,000 per annum. How much will that capital need to be? So for easy calculation again, I'm just going to say that portfolio is generating returns on investment, returns for you at 10% per annum. So 10%, so we're going to say ROI equals 10%. Return on investment equals 10%. Returns on investment equals 10%. That simply means that your capital needs to be 360,000. So you need to have £360,000 with 10% return on investment is going to give you £36,000 a year. Okay. So if for any reason you slash that into half, that will reduce the income to about 18,000. So for the purpose of the calculation I want to do here, let's just bring that to 50% of it. So 50% of this, because remember, you're going to be paying off the mortgage as well. So if you're paying off the mortgage, that's a huge chunk that you're taking out. So maybe out of the 3,000, maybe half of it is going to use the mortgage payment anyway. So we're going to slash that to half. So that means you need £180,000, right, as a lump sum to invest at 10%. So 180 at 10% give you £18,000 per year, and that is 1,500 per month. Okay. Now, let me just quickly dwell a little bit more on this aspect, really. Part of what you should do with your life whilst you're still here is to give your children not just academic education, but financial intelligence training as well. So the education that we promote, like you should give to your children, is not only academic, but also financial intelligence. Because if something were to happen to you, it's important that your children or your spouse, they are all financially savvy and they know what to do with what you're leaving behind for them. Okay. Because if you've trained your spouse or partner and your children in investing in assets like real estate, financial markets, and all that, they would know what to do with what you're going to be leaving behind for them. Okay. So financial intelligence is really important. So I'm going to really stress that. Call it financial intelligence training, FIT. Okay. Right. Now let's now sum up this amount. So what we've got here is 150 plus, that is 4. Okay, so 150 plus 150 plus 180. So that will give us, show my maths, that's 300,000. That's 480,000. 480,000 plus 5K. Okay, so we got 485,000. So what you want to do as a responsible adult, right, is to ensure that if anything happens to you, this amount is paid out to your family, right? With a very clear guidance and instruction on what they need to do with that money. Okay. So, like I said, your figure might be different. So there's 485,000. Figure might be 600 or it might be 300, right? But it's important that you have this calculation done properly. Okay. Now, let's not look into, we've done the calculations. Let's not look into the premium. So where do I go to find insurance policy? There are different kinds of insurance policy, and I'm not a financial advisor. So I would strongly encourage you to go and speak to a financial advisor or do independent research yourself. Use AI, use Google, do a search, find out the best policy for yourself. So, but for the purpose of this illustration, I'm going to be using a 40-year-old non-smoker male, right, in my calculations here, to be able to work out what your premium is going to be. And we're going to round up these to £500,000. So the sum assured that you're looking at, what we're doing now is working out the premiums. So sum assured equals 500,000. How much will the premium be? Okay. I think it's important that I mention to us that there are a few factors that affects your premium. Premium, by the way, by definition, is what you pay to the insurance provider, the company that is providing you that cover on a monthly or annual basis. That therefore guarantees this sum that will be paid out to you as a lump sum, tax-free to your family if anything happens to you. So that's what we call it, sum assured. Okay. So these factors that affect your premium are things like age. So how old you are. It's cheaper if you're younger than if you're older, right? I think that's a no-brainer, right? The other thing that affects it is your smoker status. If you're a smoker, the cost of your policy is sometimes double that of a non-smoker. Okay. The other thing that affects is your health and your medical history. Okay. So if you have a poor medical history, that would impact on the premium or the amount you're going to be paying for that policy. The other thing that affects this is the policy type, whether you go for, the policy type and the term as well. So plus term. So we have different policy terms like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And also the kind of policy that you take out as well. If it's a whole of life compared to uh, a term policy or level term, that will determine what your policy cost is going to be, your premium is going to be. On term, I think it's might be worth me chipping this in that as an adult, when you're taking out your policy, I'll use myself as an example. I took out my own life cover, my home policy, when I started a family, because I think that was a right thing to do. That was a responsible thing to do. So I took out a particular amount that I knew that will be able to take care of these four things that I mentioned earlier for my family. So I took out, work at my figure, and I took out that amount. Now, the term that I selected for that product, my policy, was enough time to give me to build up that amount in my own net worth. Okay. So, because the moment you build up that amount in your net worth, not just your net worth, in an asset, you don't necessarily need the policy anymore then. So this is what I'm trying to say here. Say, for example, you're starting with a net worth of 20,000 or 50,000 pounds, and you realize that, okay, I need about 500,000 to take care of my family. So what you then do is you have a shortfall of about 450,000. So you could take out 450,000 pounds worth of policy. And then over the, the time of your life, say you could give yourself 10 years to increase your net worth. So your net worth could be, let's say 50K right now. So let's work this out this way. So this will be money, and this will be time. Yes, right? So let's say 50,000. This is where you are right now today. So this is time T. This is today. So today you've got 50,000. Okay. What you can then work out is I need 500,000. So you know you need 500K at a time in the future. Then you can have a plan, your own personal financial plan, that I'm going to increase my net worth, right? Or double my net worth every year, or increase it by 50,000 every year, or 25,000 every year. So let's say you want to increase your net worth by 25,000 every year. That's your strategy. It will take you about 25 years or close to 25 years to get to 500. So today is 2025, and you know that by 2050, right, you will be able to hit the 500 mark, right? Okay, so that's what you're gunning for. So it makes sense, therefore, to take your policy with a term of 25 years. Okay, because now you've given yourself that protection, right? Between this period, you're protecting your family. Your family is no expense. You're protecting them. That if anything should happen, that 500K will be paid out to your family. So you know, they will even have excess. If anything happens in year 10 and you've built your net worth to about 275K, they can still collect the 500,000. And then that would mean they have extra money. If that makes sense. So that is the wisdom that you can exploit there. Okay. And I think the other factor that affects your premium is your occupation. So if you're like a sea diver or something like that, or some very risky occupation, your premium is going to be obviously much higher, because chances of you suffering an accident that could lead to the loss of your life is very high. And the other thing is the gender. Okay. So your gender affects the premium as well. Okay. Now, let's go back here. We're trying to work out what the premium for a £500,000 policy of a 40-year-old non-smoker male would be. Okay. Like I said, policy is what you're paying for. So that policy, so policy premium, again, this will vary based on the provider. What I worked out when I did my research is it will come to, for 500,000, right? For 500,000, it will come to about £32.67 every month. £32.67 every month to protect your family in case anything happens to you. Okay. So I think it will be irresponsible of any adult to not have a life insurance in place that will protect his family in case anything happens to them. So what I strongly encourage is that you don't leave it till later. Don't leave it till the future. Do something about it right now. Do something about this today. Yeah. I'm not selling, Prism Check, we're not selling you the policy. We're simply educating you and we're encouraging you to go out there, to go and, find the right policy for you and get one today. Get one today. And also, what I'm going to leave you as we wrap up this edition is go ahead and download our app. So this is one of the feature pages on the finance app of Prism Check, which is called My Gap Hub. My Gap Hub. So you can go to mygaphub.com and you find a link on there to download it from Play Store or from App Store. And you can download the app. It gives you all the stuff that we're talking about here. You can document, what your protection policy is. You can upload a document on there, but you have a central place. If anything happens to you, your spouse or your partner is not looking for the documents, of your policy, you can upload it straight up there. They can just log in into your My Gap Hub and they can find everything about your financial life in there. So on that note, we've come to the end of this edition of Smart Money Canvas. Again, like I said earlier, make sure you do something about this. Don't just listen to these and do nothing. Go and get yourself a policy today. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. For £500,000 policy, it will cost you less than £50, just slightly over £1 a day for you to protect yourself. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead and do something about these today. Until next time, make sure that you remain money smart. Thank you. See you later.